Redeem Academy.
What is up, science squirrels? My name is Johnny. Welcome to Redeem Academy. If you don't have a notebook, get one on our website, redeemacademy.org. We are in the middle of a unit, What is Biology? Today the answer to that question is ecology. We are going to be learning about two guys. Their names are William Paley and Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. Now, neither one of these guys actually studied ecology, but I want to introduce you to ecology today because the next lesson we're going to be studying is evolution, and ecology and evolution really go together. And these two guys had a huge influence on the next guy, Darwin, that we're going to be talking about. And the ecology of a specific place had a big influence on him as well. And these two guys really started talking about ideas related to ecology. So I'm going to introduce you to a really cool place called the Galápagos Islands. We're going to look at some of the ecology of those islands today. It's really going to help the conversation go from origin of life that we talked about last lesson and move us into the conversation of evolution next lesson, and also answer the question of what is biology by giving us a taste of ecology as well. So let me introduce you to a magical place called the Galápagos Islands. All right, so first up, where are the Galápagos Islands? This video does a great job taking us there. Here we go. So this, in case it doesn't look familiar to you, is the Western Hemisphere. This right here is South America. And this right here is Central America. Now these little islands that we're zooming down in on are the Galápagos Islands. And they are located 1,000 miles from South America. Now, notice that the islands are made from a bunch of volcanoes. There's probably one here, probably one used to be there. So all these islands are thought to have been formed by a volcanic hotspot. So let me show you what that is. This is a great video that explains hotspots, what they are, how they work. So this is like the side of the Earth. Oh, I need a tennis ball. Okay, so imagine that this tennis ball is the Earth. What's inside of the Earth? So scientists have figured out that the middle of the Earth is actually liquid hot magma.
Liquid hot magma.
Okay, it's what comes out of volcanoes is what's in the center of the Earth. So here's the Earth. It doesn't have any, you don't see the ocean on it because this is actually a tennis ball. But inside of the Earth, there is lava, okay? And so let me go under my camera. Okay, so here's a section of the Earth that is the ocean. Now, 70% of the Earth's surface is actually ocean, but I don't have time to color this whole thing blue. Now, if we crack this open and look at it from the side, there's two layers that I want to draw your attention to. There's the top portion, which is where the ocean is, and then there's a section just below that where there's a plate. Okay, and so there's a plate, and then below that, we're going to say, there's actually a couple more layers, but we're going to say this is the lava portion below that, okay? And there's another layer right underneath that called the mantle. So when we watch this video, they're showing us the Earth from the side like this. Okay, so now that you have that perspective, you can see we have an ocean, we have a plate, we have a mantle, and then we have what's called a hot spot right here. So there are places in the ocean where there's a hot spot, but the plate moves. And so the mantle is weak in a hot spot, and it lets a bunch of magma through and forms little volcanoes underground. And those volcanoes eventually sometimes get high enough to where they form islands that poke out of the ocean. And then the plate slowly moves, and sometimes those volcanoes come out of the water, sometimes they don't. And the oldest volcanoes are the farthest away from the hotspot, and the youngest volcanoes, like that one that just got a pacifier, are closest to the hotspot. They may even have an active volcano on them. And so then they show you in this video, an example of this is Hawaii. So I've been to Hawaii a couple times. It's a wonderful place to go on a vacation. And Hawaii on the big island still has an active volcano because it's over the hotspot. But all the other islands, like this represents Maui right here. I've been there. I think they're going for Kauai right here. I've been to those two islands. And those islands don't have active volcanoes. Maybe Maui's volcano is like slightly active, I don't know. So they are not over the hotspot anymore. So if we go back to the Galapagos, it's the same story. These islands appear to have been formed by a hotspot, And there's a whole bunch of islands in the Galapagos that I think there's one place where there's an active volcano, and the rest of the islands seem to have been formed by a active volcano sometime in the past. This is an interpretation that creationists agree with, whether they're young Earth or old Earth. This video is doing a great job showing that it's also in a really unique place because there's ocean currents from Antarctica that bring really cold water part of the year, and then there's ocean currents from Central America, another part of the year, that bring warm water, and I think there's a couple more ocean currents as well. And so this place gets a ton of weird sea life that come there from all over the place. And so let me show you some of the weird animals that live here. So every middle school boy and high school boy always laughs. This bird is called a blue-footed booby. This is a funny-looking crab that's on some of the islands. There's like 13 or 19 islands. I can't remember the number. It's in my notes. There's penguins. This is the only place in the world that's on the north side of the equator, and even near the equator where penguins live. They've got lizards 1,000 miles away. These islands formed, and somehow lizards got there. Sea lions or seals. Flamingos. This is one of the most interesting creatures. Is a giant tortoise, okay? Shout out to Master Oogway, great movie. Shout out to Kung Fu Panda. They have snakes, which is very rare for snakes to get to islands. And they've got hawks. And I think I missed the marine iguana, but I'm gonna show you the marine iguana here in a second as well. So all of these creatures live on the Galapagos Island and just maintain the most unique ecosystem that there's no other place in the world where there's an ecosystem like this. And it seems that they've just established their very own unique ecosystem on the Galapagos Islands. It's like nothing else in the world, in just this really unique place called the Galapagos. All right, so let's get a couple things written down here. These are the Galápagos Islands. IS is a good abbreviation for islands. Let's add some color to them. Here are the notes. There's 19 of them. They're 1,000 miles west of South America, the Galápagos Islands. Now, there's a couple really interesting creatures I want to look at. One of them is the Galapagos tortoise, and the other guy we're going to look at is the marine iguana. All right, here's what looks like one of the craters of a volcano that's probably collapsed after the volcano stops being active. Those are probably just clouds coming out in the morning. It could be some steam from a vent of a volcano, maybe still slightly active. Looks like time lapse while the plants are shaking. Here we can see one of the giant tortoises coming out. Let's hear what the narrator has to say.
The weight of 3 grown people.
Weighs as much as 3 people.
The Galapagos giant tortoise is the largest tortoise on Earth.
Master Oogway.
With a top speed of 300 meters an hour.
Top speed of 300 meters per hour. Some people can run 300 meters in about 40 seconds. So one of the interesting things about these guys being one of the only creatures on these islands is they have no predators. So you can go 300 meters an hour when there's no other creatures that can attack you. And the only large predators they have on these islands are hawks. And they can attack some of the iguanas on the islands, but they can't attack the tortoises. And so those tortoises have, until humans showed up 200 or 300 years ago, these tortoises had no predators, and then humans started eating them. And then things got even worse for them. Humans brought goats, and goats way outcompeted the tortoises. And so the tortoises, there's a shell, I think, of a dead tortoise. The tortoises started going extinct from the goats. And so this is a great topic in ecology. Goats became what's known as an invasive species. So invasive species is a problem caused by humans to an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is like a perfect system, kind of in balance and in harmony. And then humans, we travel quickly, and sometimes we bring things with us. And so like 200 years ago, people brought goats to the Galapagos Islands, and a couple goats get out and they start reproducing. And we're gonna watch another video here in a second. And the goats do way better than the tortoises, and they just overpopulate and take over the area. And now the tortoises are starting to go toward extinction. One, because humans kill them and eat them. That was hundreds of years ago. Humans aren't doing that anymore. And 2, because the goats are outcompeting them for resources, and the tortoises can't find food as fast as the goats can. When they're babies, though, they're little. This guy has a breeding program to breed them. And so they're just little guys when they're babies. And they grow to be these giants. And you can see here, this would be the best job in the world. So these guys are dealing with the goat problem. And check out how they're solving the goat problem. All right, so it turns out I can't show that video. Copyright. Don't worry, I have exact replicas of all the people involved. Here, playing the goats, we have Wolverine and Spider-Man. Playing a giant tortoise, the Hulk. And playing the helicopter pilot is Captain America. And playing the guy shooting the goats is Wonder Woman. That is her red gun. All right, it's time for the reenactment. Here are the goats, being an invasive species, ruining the giant tortoise's life. Here come the guys solving the goat problem, and in their helicopter. And here's Wonder Woman shooting the goats. Pew, pew! Dead goat. Pew, pew! Dead goat. Thank you, Mr. Goat Killer. And the tortoises live happily ever after. Can I just say, in my summer break, I will do this for free. You give me a gun, put me in a helicopter, I will go around shooting goats. You don't even have to pay me. But seriously, they first went out on foot. There were over 100,000 on their main island where the goats were a problem. They first went out on foot, and then when the goats' populations diminished, they would actually put a radio collar on a goat, send it out, and then it would find the goat populations because they hang out in herds. Then they'd go in a helicopter to where the goat with the collar was, and they shoot all the other goats, leave the one alive with the collar. It would go find another goat population. They do the same thing. They've completely eradicated the goats on the island so that the tortoise populations can remain. And this is like this new idea that humans have, that they shouldn't mess with the way things have established themselves. So this population they're trying to save, these guys are called giant tortoises. This field of biology where they study the interactions between organisms and their environment is called ecology, okay? And one of the things scientists are looking at on the Galapagos is just what is the natural order of how the ecosystem functions really before humans came. And so the natural way things worked was these tortoises ate the plants on the island, not goats. So get rid of the goats, set things in order how they functioned before humans were around. Now, another weird plant-eating animal that lives on the Galapagos is called the marine iguana. Now let's give both of these guys some color. I forgot about the giant tortoise. All right, here we go. Marine iguana. They are a weird little creature. Check them out. So they live on the beaches and on the rocks in the Galapagos, and they spend most of their time chilling, just soaking up the sun. As you can see, they are really friendly looking, like somebody just needs a hug. But if you walk up to them, they're actually totally like not afraid of humans. Like most of the things on the island, they've never really had predators, except for when they're born. And I'll show you that in a second. And so this homie's just walking out like, yeah, gonna go get some algae, yum. And then there's sea lions out there, or seals. I should probably get my marine biology straightened out on that. And there's penguins out there. I mean, it's just the weirdest little ecosystem. So these guys go out there, and the only thing, sea turtles, the only thing they want to do is chew on algae. You'd think a guy looking as tough as those iguanas do would be out there to like kill some fish or something. But they swim out there, and they can hold their breath for 2 or 3 minutes. They dive down, and they just chew algae off the rocks. So they're herbivores. They eat plants. They eat herbs, a couple of them out there. And he's out there chewing. That fish does not like that he is near his home. He's chewing algae off the rocks. They can only spend about 30 minutes in the ocean before they're going to freeze up because their body temperature drops so much. They're not like humans where we can go out. I mean, we can't really handle it either because it's so cold. But like, like sea lions or penguins, those are both warm-blooded creatures. They can handle the cold temperatures because they've got body fat and they've got a warm-blooded metabolism. And then they come swimming back in. So here he is coming swimming back in. And they get back on the rocks and they heat up and then they go back out and get more algae. Okay, one other thing I want to show you about the iguanas is they actually have a predator. So this is a baby iguana hatching out of the sand. So the eggs are laid in some sand, some gravel near the beach. And as soon as they hatch, these racers, which is the only snake on the island, come and try to eat the babies. And so they're a constrictor. And so if they can, they will bite down on the lizard, and then they will constrict and basically circle around and just wrap around the body and basically constrict until the lizard has suffocated. And then I'm guessing they just swallow the thing whole, which is like, how is that possible? The thing's so much bigger than them. So you can see there's one that just hatched, and it's like coming out of the sand like, what's happening to my cousin? And so there's this great footage of one getting away that I want to watch with you guys. And so here he is. He's like, oh my goodness, what was I born into? And so he takes off. The 17 snakes are like, we're going to get him. I think this reminds me of the Bible verse, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of snakes, I will fear no evil because you are with me. And I think it's like the snakes can't really see. It's like that thing with T-Rexes in the movie Jurassic Park.
Don't move. Can't see us if we don't move.
Don't move, they can't see you. So he's like chilling like, okay, they can't see me if I don't move. Snake goes right by him. Boom, he's off. Look how fast these things run. And then the 75 snakes come out after him. And then as I recall in this video, they're gonna grab him by the neck here in just a second. And it's gonna be like, snap, got him. And so now you can see the constriction happening, but they kind of constrict themselves. I think like 2 snakes are constricting themselves, and he gets away. And then he goes up on the rocks. A couple more snakes jump after him. And now he's in the land of the living. Little man has made it. And his cousin's like, bro, that was epic. We need to get that on ESPN Sports Center. Okay, so this brings us to the question of like, why are those particular creatures in that place? Okay, why are there giant tortoises there? Why are there marine iguanas there? Why aren't there really any mammals on the islands? It brings us to a question of why are things there that are there and not other things? Today, creationists would say that those islands popped up from a hotspot and that creatures, by natural processes, came to those islands, probably mostly from South America. And let me show you a picture. So this is a bunch of debris after a tsunami that happened in Japan in 2011. So a tsunami is like a giant wave that comes, hits the land, and then kind of pulls back. And so pretty much everybody would probably agree that one of the best explanations for how do animals get to islands that are 1,000 miles away is that a giant tsunami or just a big hurricane, strange catastrophic events are going to drag a bunch of stuff out to sea in a way that doesn't happen very often. And that these floating rafts of some vegetation and other stuff are going to contain what we call colonizers, species that are going to land somewhere and survive in a new place. And so after those islands popped up, new species, colonizers like snakes and lizards and bugs, and even like in a hurricane or something, birds might get blown off course once in a while, and they're going to end up 1,000 miles outside of where they thought they should be. They're going to establish new habitat in a new environment. I love what are called apocalyptic movies. So movies about the end of the world, movies about like crazy alien invasions, stuff that's totally fake. And that's kind of what it would be like to be a tortoise that gets swept away on a raft of vegetation and ends up in an island 1,000 miles away, hopefully with your tortoise wife. That must be what happened. It doesn't have to be what happened, but it seems like the best explanation to us today. Species landed on the islands and then developed new populations on those islands in the past. Okay, so that's kind of like today what creationists believe happened on those islands. And so this process is called ecological succession to some degree, where the islands sort of develop over time. Okay, so here we see the idea of succession. Let's give succession some color. Okay, and we see succession defined as the gradual process of change in the species structure of an ecosystem following disturbance, or in our case, the creation of a new habitat. All right, so these are big ecological ideas we're discussing, and ecology, we'll do a whole unit later in the year on ecology. The reason I wanted to introduce you to ecology and the Galapagos was really to introduce you to a concept that's really going to play a big role in this guy Darwin forming his opinion of evolution coming up, so that we can really critique how he thought, and to introduce you to two figures who played a big role in kind of his thinking as he formed an opinion of Darwin. So the first guy who I want to introduce you to, his name's William Paley. Let's add some color to Paley. All right, so Paley, notice he has a watch in his hand, is known for the watchmaker argument. So we're going to watch a quick video about that.
A long time ago on a planet so bare, some water and dirt got mixed up with the air. Some sand and some rocks to make it just right. The stage was all set in the deep of the night. A bolt of white lightning, a great peal of thunder. And suddenly there was a marvelous wonder. The rocks yielded metal, the sand turned to glass, and as the years flew, a new thing came to pass. The metal formed gears, the glass a watch face, and little by little things fell into place. The parts came together just like a good rhyme, with ticks and with tocks and with hands that tell time. A beautiful watch began ticking one day, formed all by itself in a wonderful way. Ridiculous story, you say with a grin. Impossible, laughable, surely a sin.
Ridiculous story, you say with a grin. So looking back at this picture, this should totally remind you of something. Anything? Primordial soup. So this is literally like the oldest video on YouTube practically. It's 18 years old. And you see lightning striking a pool from a volcano, and these parts of a watch come together. So Paley had this argument 200 years ago when he was living. He was an evangelist, he was a Christian, and he would go out and open air preach, and he would try to convince people that Christianity was true. I'm not a historian at all, but I love history of science, and it seems to me that early on in science, all the scientists seemed like they were Christians. Paley's entering a time where people are starting to turn away from God. And so he's trying to compel people to be Christians, and he's trying to use arguments sort of from science. And he would talk about the eyeball and compare it to like the complexity of a really complex thing in his day, which was a watch. Guys walked around back then with a pocket watch, and you would wind it, and you'd wind the watch, and there was a spring in there that would cause it to slowly tick. And I don't know if they had to wind it once a day or 3 times a day, but it would just tick, 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 and it would keep perfect time as long as you would wind it. So it'd be kind of like probably the equivalent of the iPhone today. Like everybody kind of had one of these things. It probably cost a fair amount of money, and it took a really good inventor or engineer to make one of these things so they actually function. And so you see in this video, they show, really good job in this video, they show all these parts that are needed for one of these watches that gets wound and powered by a spring to function. And then, as the rhyme goes, you know, the idea that this could all come together by chance is absurd. And that was Paley's argument. If you walked across one of these in the forest and you picked it up, you would never say, oh, look at this watch. How amazing that the universe just created this with lots of time and chance. And he would take that same idea and he'd say, look at your eye. It's the same way. And I don't think Paley knew about ecology, but if Paley knew about ecology, he'd look at something like the Galápagos Islands and he would say, look at the way that an ecosystem functions. The iguanas need the algae, and the algae, if there were no iguanas, it would build up, there would be too much. Look at the tortoises. The tortoises need the plants, and if there were no tortoises, there would be overgrowth of plants. And then, you know, like, I don't know, the fungus, there's a whole balance to ecosystems. I'm probably not speaking that well about this, but there's fungus that decomposes the tortoise's poop, and the tortoise's poop fertilizes the soil, and there's this system and this balance to all of it. Paley's argument would be that there's a system and a balance to it all, that God made the tortoise and he put it there on the island. And God made the grasses to grow there for the tortoise. And, you know, the grasses make oxygen and the tortoise breathes the oxygen, but then the tortoise breathes out carbon dioxide and then the plant uses the carbon dioxide. There's this total symmetry and balance to it all. And so Paley argued, I think he argued really well for design. Okay, he made a really good argument. It's called the teleological argument. It's still a great argument today, the design argument. But then he also argued for something that creationists today don't argue for, and it's called fixity of species. He thought every single thing was designed exactly for where it was, and it couldn't change in any way. And this is not a good argument. And so Paley argued, let's write his name down here. So we got William Paley, okay? He's a philosopher, an apologist, which means someone who defends Christianity, and he's most famous for his watchmaker argument. Okay? And his watchmaker argument is basically the complexity of purposefulness in the natural world, like that of watch, implies the existence of an intelligent designer, and that intelligent designer is God. That's the watchmaker argument. That's a great argument. But then he also argued for something called fixity of species. Fixity of species was a bad idea. Fixity of species was the idea that whatever ecological role an organism played in its environment, that's exactly what it did and it couldn't change. And that's going to end up hurting Paley later on when Darwin thinks about it. Now there's another guy, and his name is Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. He's French. Let's add some color to him. All right, so Lamarck is like on the other side of things. So here's Paley. He says creatures can't change at all. Lamarck is like, they can change so much. So notice Lamarck's holding a giraffe. It was like the example of what he had to say. So Lamarck says, you know giraffes, how they have a long neck? Well, they're just a horse that evolved a long neck, and here's how it happened, okay? So Lamarck is the first guy to propose a theory of evolution, and here's how he says it happened. All right, here's your first generation giraffe, okay? And that giraffe is like, I can't reach the food. And so he's reaching as hard as he can for the food every day, reaching. And over time, over the course of his life, maybe his neck gets, 3 inches longer from all the stretching. So then he has babies. And his babies, this is where it really doesn't make any sense. His babies, when he has babies, they are born with necks that are 3 inches longer. Perfect. Okay, those are the second generation giraffes. Now notice, they already have longer necks. Now they spend their lives stretching their necks to reach the food that's up higher, because there's a shortage of food. There's this struggle to survive. And then it's time for them to reproduce. When they have babies, their babies have necks that are 3 inches longer. Those are the third generation giraffes. And so those giraffes now have necks that are 6 or 9 inches longer than their great-grandpa or their grandpa. Then when they have babies, they're stretching their necks their whole lives. When they have babies, that's going to be the fourth generation babies. And those babies are going to have necks that are like 12 inches longer. Man, this is amazing. This is working so good. Okay? And then they're going to stretch their necks their whole lives, and their necks get 3 inches longer while they're alive. And they're going to have babies. And guess what? Fifth generation babies? Their necks are like 2 feet longer than great-great-grandpa. And this was Lamarck's theory of evolution, that if you use it, it does what you need, and then you pass it on to your offspring. And if you don't use it, it goes away. And so ostriches, no more wings. And he just thought, use it, evolve it, don't use it, devolve it. And that was his theory of evolution. Now, today, we know that doesn't work at all. That doesn't make any sense. And people weren't really like, yeah, that's a great explanation. People were like, yeah, I don't think so, bro. That doesn't make a ton of sense. So it didn't really take off, but at the same time, it was thoughts. It was thoughts that were out there in the universe. And Lamarck would say about ecology, oh yeah, man, just animals show up on the islands, they adapt to everything, evolve everything. And so ecology and the Galápagos are this environment where it's like, well, which explanation makes the most sense? Did God create the islands just as they are, or did creatures show up and adapt to it? And we're going to see Darwin visits the Galápagos, and it's one of the places that changed his mind about things. And so we'll get into that next week. We still need to write down some words about Lamarck. Lamarck is he's a Francais biologist who developed the first comprehensive theory of evolution. And he thought evolution could happen by use or disuse. You know what the saddest thing is about Lamarck? Look at his name, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck. His parents named him after John the Baptist. John the Baptist was the guy who was telling people about Jesus before Jesus came. John the Baptist was the guy who was like, make ready the way of the Lord. John the Baptist was like this on-fire Christian who said, Jesus is going to increase and I'm going to decrease. And he was okay with that. Lamarck's this guy who's like, make ready the way for Charles Darwin. What a waste of a guy whose name was John the Baptist. He was supposed to be somebody whose life brought glory to God, and instead his life took people's eyes off of God. What a waste. Your parents raised you to be a light in the darkness, and you were like a darkness flashlight, man. What a waste. I don't want my life to be like that. I don't want to use science as something that turns people away from God. And that's exactly what Lamarck's life did. His life turned people away from God. And we're going to see, like, beginning of science, people were turning to God. They were glorifying God. Science was something that was bringing people to God. And then Lamarck and the guys that follow, and I'm not saying it's all Lamarck's fault, the next 200 years of science following Lamarck, people are turning away from God because of science. What a waste. Look at this verse out of Romans. This is what happens to the scientific community about the time of Lamarck. For although they knew God, they did not honor him as God, nor give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Lamarck, he's named to be a man who brings God glory, but he starts looking for a way to explain life without God. They become futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts are darkened. They don't want to honor God. They know God, and they don't want to honor God. Tragic. The purpose of science is to glorify God. It makes me mad. Big question today. How can we think carefully about ideas like Paley's and Lamarck's, knowing that science about the past can change, but God's truth does not? All the science we've been discussing so far, I think, is empirical science. Pasteur, empirical science. Semmelweis, empirical science. Leeuwenhoek, empirical science. We're starting to get into, and big time next lesson, historical science. Trying to explain the past, and then if you're not going to honor God when you try to explain the past, you're going to try to explain the past without God, what a waste of your life. You're becoming futile in your thoughts. There's a great saying, the chief end of man. What is man's purpose? What is your greatest duty? The chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. If your science isn't glorifying God, get some new science. Answer that big question. Love God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. Love God with your mind in the science you do. Have a great day. Hope this was a great lesson for you. Peace out.